What's up everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking all about the Garmin Enduro. This is my long-term review. I've had this watch for about 6 months. I've ran 3 ultra distance runs in it, a 100 miler, a 50 miler, and a 50K. We'll talk all about those experiences that I've had with this watch. But first off, I want to say that this watch has checked off a lot of the boxes of things that ultra runners have been asking for recently. It's got battery life to last, it's simple to use, and it's very comfortable to wear. A lot of the features of this watch let us kind of forget about the watch and focus on the task at hand, whether that's running 100 miles or climbing a mountain, going on a multi-day adventure, or just soaking up the wilderness around us. So right off the top, I will say that I do like this watch, but did Garmin go too far in their attempt to give ultra runners the perfect watch for these long distance events and multi-day adventures? Are there some things missing that you are gonna wish they had? You know that Garmin did not provide this watch for review. I bought it with my own money, so all these opinions are my own. I've got about 700 miles on it according to the odometer on here. Like I said, I've done a couple ultra distance events, so I feel like I have a pretty good handle on this. I've had it for about 6 months, and so those 700 miles have come while testing out a whole bunch of other watches as well. So I've been able to compare and contrast to some of the top watches out there in the market right now. One of the most grueling events that I took this watch through was the Cruel Jewel 100, which is a 108-mile mountain ultra down in Georgia. 33,000 feet of gain, took me 39 hours to finish, and the Enduro still had 49% battery life left at the end. Also did about 50 kilometers, about 33 miles out at the Western States 100 while I was pacing. So this watch has seen that course as well. And most recently, it took me through 50 miles at the Indiana Trail 100. So this video isn't going to be a deep dive into all the features and specs of this watch. There's already plenty of videos out there that do that, and that's not really my personality. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is give you basically a list of headlines of things that I really like about this watch, and 3 in particular that set this watch apart from others in my opinion. And then we'll circle back around and I'll give you some things that I don't like about this watch as well. So the first thing that I really like about this watch is the battery life, and that was the biggest headline when this came out about 6 months ago. We've got 70 hours of GPS activity time, and there's a solar ring around the edge of the watch so that if you're in direct sunlight for a good portion of that activity, it can add up to 10 extra hours to that activity. So you could theoretically do an activity in full GPS mode for 80 hours. For me personally, that is like way over the top, way more than you would ever need. I am doing races up to 100 miles, and so having 70 hours of GPS on time, even without direct sunlight charging from the solar ring, is plenty for one activity. Where this does provide some added benefits is that you don't have to charge this nearly as much as other watches. Something like the Apple Watch that I'm wearing right now, I do have to charge it every day. In my opinion, that's not a huge deal because I can usually find time throughout the day to throw it on the charger for an hour or 2, and it's not a big deal. Something like the Enduro that you don't have to charge more than once a month, once we get into that battery range where I'm confident that I can finish a 100 miler with one charge and not have to worry about, I'm good with that. I've also got the Vertex 2 over here for testing, so that video is going to come out later as well, and we're going to compare and contrast what it's like having these 2 batteries up against each other. We're in that area where you really don't have to worry about your battery life anymore for a single event, even up to 100 miles. The second point I want to talk about with the Garmin Enduro is how it wears on your wrist, and this is very, very important for ultra endurance events. You do not want something that is uncomfortable, that you're going to be thinking about a lot, that you're going to be constantly fidgeting with. The Garmin Enduro is a very comfortable watch, and a lot of that has to do with the shape of the actual watch itself, but then also this nylon band that they've given you. And at first, I have to admit that I was kind of skeptical that Garmin would be able to pull this off well. With the Apple Watch, I really love the nylon band. With the Garmin Enduro, I had to try it before I believed it, and I did buy an extra silicone band, but I've only worn that a handful of times because honestly, I prefer the nylon band on this Enduro. It's very comfortable. The nylon band reduces a lot of the bounce that you get, a lot of the vibrations that come from running. You're able to customize the length of it to exactly what you want. With the silicone bands, you are limited to the notches. I was also very impressed with the weight of the watch. I got the titanium titanium version, and without a band on it, it weighed in at 54.5 grams. With the band on, 60.4. So the band adds very, very little weight. If you're gonna go with the steel version of the Enduro, which will save you $100, you're just gonna add 10 grams to the weight. Moving on past the weight though, we have to talk about how it feels on your wrist. And this isn't the thinnest of watches, it's also not the lightest of watches, so the shape on your wrist is gonna matter a lot. There's not a whole lot of extra material protruding from the sides or the bottom. It just is very smooth on your wrist. And like I said, with the nylon band, you can customize it to the exact length that you want. Nylon band also reduces a lot of bounce. All in all, the Garmin Enduro, the titanium version, 60 grams with the nylon band, the shape of it on your wrist, it felt very nice. Like even during this 39-hour cruel jewel through the mountains, I didn't really have to adjust it very much at all. Other watches I constantly am fidgeting with, or they're kind of like digging into my skin a little bit. Never had that issue with the Enduro. I was very, very happy with it. And the third big point I wanted to talk about with the Garmin Enduro is the ultramarathon specific features, specifically one, the rest timer. And this was something that was awesome to use during my races. When you start an ultra run activity on the watch, in the middle of it, you press the lap key, it brings up a rest timer and it shows you your full time and your rest time. And this was very, very useful. You can just limit your time and it's very obvious on the watch. Maybe you want to only spend 5 minutes or less at this aid station. So you can keep track of your time very easily. When you're leaving the aid station, you can just hit the lap key again, goes back to normal mode. Later, when you're reviewing your activity in Garmin Connect, you can see all of those times that you were in rest mode and how long each of them were. Those are 3 things that I really love about this watch that specifically set the Enduro apart from other watches. Some other quick hits that I really like about this watch that didn't make the top 3. We've got pretty fast UI. I was happy to see that. The button layout is the same that we're used to on Garmin's. They didn't mess with that. It just works and makes sense. The screen is easy to read in all environments. It's very customizable. Also, one thing that is specific to Garmin that other brands don't do is that when you're in the middle of an activity, you can actually change the data that you see in your activity. And I actually took advantage of this during the Cruel Jewel 100. I had a data field on there that I thought was going to make a lot of sense to me during the race that I was really going to like. It was the difference between vertical climbed and vertical descended. And during the race, I was just like, I don't care about this. Like, it doesn't matter to me anymore. The mountains are huge anyway. So in the middle of the activity, I actually went in, edited that data screen to something else that was more useful in the moment, and it worked flawlessly. It was great. Didn't stop the activity, didn't screw anything up. It was just a really nice feature that Garmin has that you can change what you see on the screen in the middle of your activity. Garmin's have always been very dependable. The data is always very accurate, and the syncing with my phone is always very fast. So there's no differences there with the Enduro. It fits right in with the rest of the Garmin's and performs as expected in all those areas. All right, let's get on with things that I do not like about this watch. The number one thing, the thing that I think could be a deal breaker for some people, and the thing that I really disagree with not being included in this watch is the lack of Topo Maps. The navigation features on this watch are just about as basic as any other watch. It's got a line on the screen and an arrow, and that's it. But for the price of this watch, it should include Topo Maps. There is absolutely no reason why the navigation features are so limited on a watch at this price point. I know the reason why they'd probably give is hardware related, that the battery life would probably suffer, but honestly, I think the reason why that they chose not to include Topo Maps and real navigation on the Enduro is that all of a sudden the Phoenix line would be a little bit less relevant. That's just speculation, but my opinion is that it should have been included in this watch. We're paying a premium price for this watch. It's aimed at ultra runners and multi-day adventurers. Why is it not included? And that leads me into the next dislike about this watch. It's also a pretty big one, and it comes in right on the coattails of the previous dislike, and that is the price. The titanium version that I have right here is $900. The steel version is $800. Moving on, there's a couple smaller points that I do want to mention that I didn't really like about this watch. First one is the thickness. When you're wearing it, it is a little bit thicker than some of the other watches out there on the market, and so you do bang it into things a little bit more. It does kind of get in the way a little bit, and sleeping with it is a little bit more cumbersome than something like an Apple Watch or even some of the thinner watches like the Coros Apex or Pace or even like the Polar Vantage. It is pretty comparable to other ultra endurance type watches out there in the market, but I am looking forward to the day where manufacturers will start making these things smaller and thinner. that's going to be a great day. All right, so let's start wrapping this video up and talk about conclusions and final thoughts. I think if you are going to get this watch, you're going to have to answer yes to a couple questions. Number one, how important is comfort to you? This watch specifically shines in the comfort during a 100-miler category. There's a lot of watches out there that I would definitely not wear for a 100-miler because they're just not very comfortable. Maybe the band cuts into my skin, or they're heavy, they've got some sharp parts around the side. So if that is very important to you, I think you're going to like this watch. And the second thing that you'd have to answer yes to is, do you want to be in the Garmin ecosystem, and do you have to have the absolute best battery life watch they offer? For me, I would definitely answer yes to the first one. I really care about how it feels on my wrist. I don't want to be thinking about adjusting the watch during a race. If something is digging into my skin like some other watches that are out there right now do, that really would take away from my experience of the race. So comfort is very important to me, how it wears on the wrist during a really long ultra. For me though, I don't know if I would answer yes to the second one. I definitely like the Garmin ecosystem. I like how they handle my data. It's easy to export. It's easy to analyze online. The app is really nice. The web version is really nice. But I don't know if I have to have the absolute best battery life that they offer. So I think that anything between a 40 to 50 hour battery life is probably more than enough for most people. And past that, we're literally just talking about how often do you have to charge your watch? Is it every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks? So in conclusion, if you answered yes to both of those questions, the comfort on the wrist and having a Garmin that is the absolute best battery life they offer, then this is probably going to be the perfect watch for you. So that's it for me, my final thoughts on the Garmin Enduro, my full review. I think it is going to be the absolute perfect watch for a lot of ultra runners out there. But in my opinion, I just wish that Garmin would stop leaving features out from different lines and just focus on offering us the absolute best watch that they can make. Stay tuned for the reviews of the other watches that I mentioned in this video, and we'll also be comparing them to the Garmin Enduro. But again, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye.